Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and today I want to chat with you guys a little bit about understanding that a 1 rep max is a 1 rep max, and that the skill of maxing out is not always specific to the exercise that we're doing. And this is something that people who run the conjugate system have figured out, they've learned. I have friends and people I know who run the system who are raw lifters with 500 plus pound benches, 700-pound squats, things like that, who are friends of mine, who, when they max, they rotate maxes just like you guys see me do, just like you see my clients do. And what people need to understand is that, again, maxing out is a skill itself. In other words, if you get good at maxing out, you're good at maxing out. Okay, and it doesn't really matter the exact variation of the exercises that you use. In other words, changing your grip width on a bench, changing barbells, adding bands or chains, benching to pins. Okay, it's all maxing out. Hip hinging is the same. You get transfer. In fact, even maxing on your good mornings can transfer to your squats and your deadlifts. Right? A hip hinge is a hip hinge. I have lifters who don't test a lift for 6 months and then come in and hit a PR on it. And it could be their sumo deadlift, their normal sumo deadlift, their conventional deadlift, their back squat. Right? It doesn't matter. It really doesn't matter to the degree that people think it does, as long as you have maxed and practice maxing on movements that are similar enough. All right? And here's one of the added advantages you have if you're doing this stuff all the time. You're rotating lifts, you're changing lifts. It teaches you that when you get out of your groove and something goes wrong, you pop into your groove. Plus, you're used to ramping up on a max. People say, well, you need some practice. Well, you warm up with it. Right? Let's say you're going to go for a 600-pound deadlift or whatever. Well, you might go, 3, 4, 5, 600. Okay, you've done multiple singles ramping up. And that's the more extreme case. A lot of times people like to take smaller jumps. They get up and find out where they're at, and they stop. Right? They get to a good heavy weight, hit a PR, and they quit. But they still got practice on the ramp up. You're still getting the groove down, because that's the whole point of warming up, right? Is to prime your nervous system and get to the groove of a movement pattern. So it's not like you're coming in and, I haven't done this type of deadlift in whatever 6 months. So you don't just automatically go straight to 615. You're probably doing a rep or so with 500 or 550 or whatever first. Okay, so we do get practice. You get into your groove and then you do it. But again, people have this idea that if it's not on the specific lift, and I heard when, Dan Green did his West of West Side thing many years ago, and he talked about, well, this is the best squat or whatever that I hit. And he was a very young man. I've hit bigger squats than the squat that he got off conjugate. And I'm not at his level. I recall that, and Dan Green wrote that article and it made a big fuss. And I bought into some of it, and I realized later he was flat wrong. He was flat wrong. And he had said, well, everyone talks about running this sort of system that if you miss groove, you learn to just grind through it. But if you practice the lifts, you're in your groove. I'm like, but does that really matter? Because on a true max, when you go to hit a true max, no practice with sub-maximal weight is going to give you the same technique. And I hate to have to tell people that. They have this idea that on low-skill lifts, like the classic lifts, the big three, and we're not talking about the snatch and clean and jerk. We're not talking about high-skill movements. Squat, bench, and deadlift, even their variations of them, are not high-skill technical movements. Not saying there's no skill, but it's not what people think it is. They don't require large amounts of practice once you've learned the movement. All right? just get in and perform it. They're low skill lifts. That's why they're used in powerlifting to test brute strength. Okay? These are not high skill movements. Again, not saying there's zero skill, but relatively speaking, you don't need that much practice. What you need is to be strong. Well, how do we get strong? By hitting heavy weights. But do people not understand that hitting heavy weights above 90% with a safety bar or a cambered bar still transfers to your normal back squat? Of course it does. In fact, hitting those at 95% will have better carryover than doing singles at 85% will on the specific lift. It's actually more specific. Your technique's not going to look the same anyways. Right? We know that as you get closer to a 1 rep max, even EMGs light up different ratios in muscles. In other words, it's not the same movement. 95% of your max on the same lift is not the same movement that 85% is. So you're not practicing shit. You're practicing a different movement. Now, people, and that's the same problem people have with us rotating these maxes. They're like, well, it's just not the same movement. Well, neither is yours. But at least in this case, you're actually getting practice hitting a really heavy weight. You're still getting practice hitting a max, even if it's a training max. We also get less overuse. You get less beat up from it. So in this case, we can actually max every single week, right? We can have 2 days every week where we start off with a max and not get overuse from it because we're rotating the movements. And this matters, because this is what the issue is. I mean, that is the only argument people have against maxing every week or on a high frequency. Well, overuse problems start to occur. So therefore, we need to break it up into phases. If that goes away with for rotating movements, it goes away completely. Allows us to do it year round. Therefore, our strength stays high. The strength we define as maximum strength stays high year round. And then everything else is dedicated towards speed, explosiveness, and more importantly, hypertrophy, right? We need to be as thick as possible. All right, guys, but that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I'll talk to you guys next time.